Today we will continue our exploration of this topic from the Unarguables to the Immeasurables. This will be part 3 of 4. What we're really focusing on here is navigating this path that takes us away from being controlled by the Unarguables, the P's and C's, and takes us to this territory of the Immeasurables, where we can live from their ground. And the pathway is by cultivating and applying each of the 5 E's. So, of course, by the Unarguables, we're talking about the 3 P's. How life is not permanent, not perfect, and we don't need to take it personally, and when we do, it's a problem. And we're also talking about the 4 C's, the 4 conditions of being human that are beyond our control. And the way to have what happens next be up to us is to cultivate the 5 E's. And that then points us in the direction of the Immeasurables. The Immeasurables are the qualities that open our hearts: loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. These qualities are immeasurable in the sense that they're infinite, they're transcendent, and they still have a mystery about them, which means that we don't quite fully understand what they are, how they function, and how we cultivate them. We have some ideas, but they're not necessarily certainty. And the 5 E's, the 5 characteristics of our feeling of being enough, are awareness, our capacity to avoid that which is harmful, approach that which is beneficial, to have self-regulation, and learning. So last week on Wednesday, a week ago, we explored awareness and how that helps us move from the Unarguables to the Immeasurables. And what we focused on in particular were a couple of things. One, how awareness enables and enhances each of the other 4 characteristics of our enoughness, how it interacts with them, and how awareness gives us direct experience with life, taking us out of the conceptual into what's happening right now. And on Friday, we worked with the topics of avoid and approach, and we especially emphasized how easily avoid can degrade into aversiveness, and how easily approach can degrade into craving. And what we focused on was being able to recognize when each of those was happening, when avoid was turning into aversiveness. What does that feel like? How do we know that that's happening in ourselves? Through our thoughts, the arising of emotions, and sensations, especially physical sensations. And similarly, for knowing how approach turns into craving. This week, we're going to be talking about self-regulation and learning, and particularly through the lens of understanding and applying what each of those characteristics of our enoughness is about. The territory of understanding is focusing on how we keep diverting ourselves from a path that leads toward happiness, joy, equanimity, being at ease, and instead causing ourselves to suffer. It's the 3 P's that make life hard. And it's the 4 C's that cause us to make life harder. When we get wrapped up when we are able to understand how each of the four conditions that's beyond our control show up in ourselves, then we shift our relationship to those conditions. They are no longer controlling us. They are no longer acting in ways that make this already challenging life even harder and cause suffering. That's what the understanding is. The applying has to do with wiring and rewiring our brains to make skillful choices so that we can be in this place of awareness when life is hard and make skillful and find the space to make skillful choices that relieve us from how the four conditions cause us to make life harder. So let's go back to the example we all worked with last week about mixed feelings, dual reality. And I talked on both days about how college football shows up in my life, how it's been a source of excitement and entertainment and deep connections with family since the mid-1950s and even through today. And at the same time, how appalled I am by how much money has channeled into it, how it has dramatically changed it and in many ways corrupted it, how badly the athletes are treated, and how even today it's a source of major injuries that have significant long-term implications for the participants. So there are all these mixed feelings that I have. And with mixed feelings, we're very vulnerable to aversion about those things we don't like and to craving about the things we do like. And it's applying self-regulation to enable learning that gives us the opportunity to rewire and to change our relationship. So a few comments about self-regulation. The self-regulation we're talking about here in mindfulness is decidedly different from the self-regulation that most of us have learned about in our lives, which was more or less in the territory of self-discipline. You've got to be tough. You've got to get yourself, your emotions, under control. Those are the messages that so many of us heard, which leads to the harsh self-criticism, to the not being kind and caring with ourselves. And there's some pretty dramatic research that's been done in many academic settings over the last 20 years that demonstrates that approach to self-regulation is not only not helpful, but it's often compounds the problems. So what we're talking about here with self-regulation is moving away from a controlling model to a cultivating model. Self-regulation is the basis for what we have traditionally referred to as ethics or virtue or values in our culture, which are just really fancy words for talking about how we can interact skillfully with one another, with other humans, with other forms of life, animals and plants, and how we can interact skillfully with the whole planet. And of course, by skillfully, we're talking about being beneficial instead of harmful. What's important about self-regulation is that it's part of how our brains have evolved. These capacities for self-regulation are in the brain. And remembering that evolving is about focusing on surviving and thriving. And those who survive and thrive are the ones who pass on the genes. And those who don't survive and thrive are much less likely to pass on the genes. That's simply how the process of evolution works. And this is what we've evolved toward. Areas like the prefrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate cortex, are very important in self-regulation. And I laid out some of the details in the email I sent out on Monday, so I won't repeat them here. But the essence of it is that we have this capacity to instigate skillful, beneficial inclinations in ourselves, and we have the capacity to inhibit unskillful and harmful inclinations. All of this reflects our awareness that actions have consequences. And sometimes we are very skillful about recognizing when that's happening. And at other times, we're flat out oblivious. We just have no idea how our actions are having consequences, whether the consequences are harmful or not harmful. What matters here, again, goes back to awareness. Awareness of the realities of the 3 Ps and the 4 Cs. Awareness of how our inclination to avoid can degenerate into aversiveness, and awareness of how our inclination to approach that which is beneficial can degrade into craving and grasping. And the best way to deal with this is through direct experience. So let's do a practice. Beginning by settling in to the surface we're sitting on, feeling its support, and taking a couple of deep in-breaths, long, slow out-breaths that help us settle, allowing us to direct our attention to this moment. And as we settle in, softening and opening to the experience. And turning for a moment to our breathing, appreciating how it's always there, how it supports us, and how we can observe it. How we can raise our level of awareness about our breathing by knowing when we're breathing in that we're breathing in, and knowing that when we're breathing out, we're breathing out. And recalling an experience of mixed feelings, of dual realities in your life, perhaps the same one you worked with last week, or maybe something new that has arisen or that's prominent in your experience right now. Naming some of the specifics. What are some of the positive aspects of this mixed experience? What are the negative aspects of this mixed experience? And for the next few moments, choose either the positives or the negatives to focus on and work with. The positives are about approaching that which is beneficial. And the negatives are about avoiding that which is harmful. In either case, noticing the extent to which you are taking personally either the positives or negatives. Noticing how your own conditioning, how one or more of the 4 C's is causing you to take this experience personally, as if it's all about you, as if the only way you're processing this experience is through your own preferences. The things that you are partial to, prefer in your life. And noticing how taking it personally can easily shift us from approaching to desire and craving, or from avoiding to aversiveness, maybe even hatred. Just being an observer. Noticing how bringing awareness, being an observer without judgment, begins to create just a little space, a little sense of spaciousness. And once you sense that spaciousness, expand it a little bit on each in-breath. Expanding your awareness from just your own body and thoughts to the surface you're sitting on, and to the room you're in, and to the building. To your community. However far you can expand your awareness, expanding the sense of spaciousness. Appreciating with this expanded spaciousness how you can transcend the either-or aspect of this situation of mixed feelings. How you can make skillful choices about how you want to relate to this experience in your life. And savoring this place, knowing this place of awareness, spaciousness, skillful choices.